Alright, so hello one and all, welcome back to another Mushoku Tensei episode review where I'll be going over the manga and light novel to discuss everything that the anime covered and everything that the anime skipped, because there is a lot. And now it's at this point where I normally say that we'll be moving on to the manga, which I just realized just shouldn't be here. So it's not like the manga doesn't adapt these, like, the scene. It's more so that it kind of just does it really, really differently. Like, they literally storm the castle like what Ruijerd wants to do and what he's been itching to do. They don't do this whole secretive little plan thing that they have going on. They go straight for it. So I'll be making a video talking about that at some point, probably in the future. Certainly not in the past. And so for now, I guess we'll just move on to the light novel. We start off with Rudius's hilarious free rent gag before he remembers that he's just repeating his jokes at this point. And from there, he had spent an entire day, or what he thought was a whole day, trying to remove the barrier by punching at it, punching at the ground, or using magic, climbing up, building mana like they do in anime and just explode with power, but suffice to say, nothing really worked. Rudius, depressed, starts to think about all the possibilities of Pax changing his mind and killing Lilia. Or what if Roxy comes back and Rudius is stuck helpless to do anything? Or what if they get Eris and she falls victim to Pax? Hitogami did say that Aisha and Lilia would be fine. He didn't say anything about anyone else. But no, this is Hitogami's way of getting Rudius to trust him, so this might be part of the plan, right? But he then realizes that Pax is a moron, he's an idiot. It might not have even prepared food for Rudius while he's here, and plus there's no place to relieve himself either. So Rudius needs to get out of there pronto. And so he thinks of an idea. What if he pledges his loyalty to Pax and goes, the truth is, this Roxy, she's been getting on my nerves for a long time now, boss. And actually, I know where her parents are. What do you think about doing it in front of them, eh, boss? But no, Rudius can abandon any sense of his pride. But there's no way that he can say something bad about Roxy or her family. And so just as Rudius is thinking about what to do, Zenoba comes down the stairs and goes, just as Ginger told me. They introduce themselves and Zenoba whips out the Ruijerd figure and asks Rudius about it. But he says that he simply picked it up in the Demon Continent. And then Zenoba goes, oh, where did you get it then? Where in the continent? What did the seller look like? Who were they? And Rudius goes like, no idea, man. I couldn't tell ya. And then Zenoba starts to freak out, and Rudius, out of fear, goes on to say, oh, the figure, yeah, it works like a charm to get any super, to be friendly with you, right? You just show them the figure, and then they'll be happy, right? And Zenoba presses Rudius for more, and he goes, you'll be blessed with perfect health and children, and also you'll get really good at swordplay. But Zenoba just doesn't care about any of that. He wants to know more about the seller. And so, I'm curious about the situation. Zenoba pulls out the Roxy figure, and says that his brother Pax discovered the figure and bought it because it looked like Roxy, their court magician at the time. And Rudius repeats Zenoba asking about Roxy, and Zenoba said that Pax would sexually harass her and steal her underwear and peek on her while she's bathing. Appalled by this, Rudius goes like, seriously, how awful. People like that need to be severely punished, such as having their computer smashed with a bat. He should be forced to live under the same roof as a young miss with a killer punch that could knock your lights out in a single blow. He should be stripped and naked and thrown in a cell and have water tossed on him. Shit, I'd even be willing to conjure up an earth lance and slam it right into his ass. One thick and shaped like a traffic cone. But honestly, did he think that it was okay to steal Roxy's panties and all that? No, it was unacceptable. It was unforgivable. It didn't matter if he was the prince, he should know right from wrong. No wonder she left. Wait, shit, is that why she left me? But Zenoba then explains that he has a weakness for figures and collects them from all over the world. The only one in his possession whose figures and origin that he didn't know was the Superin Roxy figure. He does know that it was made from rock and was chiseled down, but it's harder and heavier than any stonework used by the dwarves. No one in the world has such a technique to create a sculpture this elaborate from such a hard rock. Even for the most trained and skilled dwarf, carving something so precisely in stone was insanely difficult. And according to Rudius, the staff was quite difficult to make since it would break often. Thanks to his efforts, however, he was able to make something very tough and durable and use the same material for Ruijerd's spear. Like for the figure's Ruijerd of his spear for the figure. not actual. Making it took a fair bit of mana, concentration, and time to achieve. A whole day just for a centimeters of work. But in the end, it was worth it, especially with this praise. But Zenoba goes on to say that he's appalled that it was sold for a mere 5 gold Surin coins, but justifies it since the figure is one of a demon after all. If one of Mill's Faith's Temple Knights knew Rudius was in possession of this, he would be put on trial for heresy, even if you were the Prince of Sharon. They'd execute you for being a demon god worshipper. Yeah, these knights were really fanatics, huh? Although Zenoba didn't want to get involved with a demon god worshipper, he still wanted to find the creator of the figure. And that was when Lilia suddenly appeared, just one day after Roxy had left. She was taken by the soldiers, and after things were finally settled, Pax took possession of her things, and this was an item that was on her. Zenoba reached into a bag to grab a small box, a box that contained the holy relic, and a small wooden pendant. The pendant was like a type of wood that Rudius recognized, and noticed that it was hand carved, but you could tell that it was made by practiced hands. Rudius thinks that this is the pendant that Zenoba wants to talk about, but it's the panties. The pendant was just the camouflage, but Zenoba had already deduced that the true treasure was the cloth wrapped around them. Lilia must have thought that it would have been too embarrassing to give the panties as a birthday gift, so she threw in the pendant. However, unfortunately, the panties have been washed. Roxy's extra virgin olive oil had been cleaned away. They've already lost their divinity. Roxy was no longer nestled in that pair of underwear. In her place resided Lilia's sincerity. Anyway, Rudius goes on to be like, what's with the panties, dude? Why are you talking to me about panties now? As Zenoba hummed and said, before we talk about the panties, let me explain this figurine to you. And then Zenoba goes on to describe, like, too much detail. And I'm gonna recite it, every word. I don't know, all this just feels weird. And so he began to speak. The words came like a flood, unending, and he had the look of ecstasy on his face the entire time. First, look at it at the front. A glance will tell you that it's just a normal magician wielding a staff. Look at the way the fabric wrinkles, the way that she steps out with her leg, the staff clutched lightly in her hand and thrust out. The moment is captured so vividly. And then look at the hem and the sleeves of her robe, the wrists and ankles, the slight exposure of her skin. It's so ever slight, and yet it somehow has a sense of eroticism to it. It's from what little you can see that you realize this girl is thin, that her lithe figure is hidden within the depths of the robes. Her clothing is so loose around her, but you can tell. Next, let's look at her from behind. Normally you can't see the outline of the body in such baggy clothing, but by putting the leg in front, the clothing is pulled tight so you can just see the slightest outline of her butt. A small butt. You probably wouldn't find it sexy at all if you saw it in real life, but the way it stands out in this baggy robe is exactly what makes it sexy. It's the way her butt is presented that makes you want to see more. And actually, you can do just that. If you unclasp the part that keeps her robe on there, you can see her innocent form clad in underwear. Not only that, but this girl isn't wearing a bra either. The good decision for someone like Roxy, since she has such a small chest. Now, if you turn the figurine back around, you can see that her left arm is covering her breasts. Strange, you'd think, because her left hand was just grasping the staff just a moment ago. But if you look at the robe you just pulled off, you realize that the hand was attached to it. That's right, this figure has 3 arms. One extra for when the robe is attached, and another for when you reduce her to her underwear. With this little gimmick, you can have 2 figures in one. It's truly genius. Normally, constructing a figure with removable clothing forces the pose to be static, but hiding an extra limb within her clothes gives a sense of freedom to her pose. That's not the only thing. Next, let's look at her from the side. When she wears her robe, the line of her back is curved and her leg is stretched out front, but when you take it off, for some reason she's slumped forward, almost as if she's trying to hide her chest, her body. Now that you've seen that, look at her face. When she had her robe on, she looked dignified. Now she looks like she's desperate to hide how shy she really is, right? The person who made this understood that the impression given by the figurine would change with the clothing. That's why they knew that they could leave the expression the same. This is an object of the most exquisite quality. Certainly, there are aspects that it couldn't hope to compare to the nuanced skill of the dwarves. You might call it amateur at best, and yet this figurine itself is in a realm far beyond what those crude dwarves could ever hope to achieve. And Rudius did not miss a single word of that. Most people would be flabbergasted by his spiel, much like most of you, I'm sure. But as the creator of the figurine, Rudius digested every word that he said and was quite satisfied with his review. He put everything he had into this figure, and that's why... Wait. The mole is missing. Zenoba goes, it lowered the beauty of the figure, so I shaved it off. Rudius froze at his words. His eyes widened and his body stiffened. You shaved it off? Zenoba, not being a complete idiot, notices Rudius knew about the mole. That means he does know something about the figure. Ignoring Zenoba, he demands to turn the figure around to look at it for himself. Look at where the hand is positioned. Can you tell she's not quite covering it? Can you tell that her hand doesn't quite reach it? Do you understand now why she's hiding her breasts but not hiding the mole? Zenoba started to tremble and exclaimed, No, it can't be. The reason why the mole is there is to emphasize the embarrassment of not being able to hide both of her nipples and her mole at the same time. This is a weird conversation. Zenoba starts to freak out as Rudius goes, it's a simple fix, but anyway, what about the panties? What are you talking about with that still? Thanks for the review, but like what? But Zenoba says that the panties are the same panties from the figure. And so that made sense because Rudius used the panties that he was most familiar with when creating the figure. Roxy did have 4 other pairs of panties at the time, and all of them had a slightly different design. She was quite fashion conscious, and Rudius gave up on hiding the identity of the figure's creator and went, okay, I get what you're on about, okay? What else do you want to know about the figurines? And so now Zenoba freaks out that he basically just realized that he met his idol, and he realizes that since Rudius is the pupil of the Water King magician Roxy, he figures that these figures were made out of magic. Zenoba freaks out like he does in the anime, looking for a magic crystal, crawling up the walls and shit, and after an hour he only finds a letter-sized hole in the ceiling with a removable lid. That's probably how Rudius was going to be fed. Rudius could escape from that hole, but it was sealed away with a heavy stone slab, and there's no way that anyone that Rudius just met would be strong enough to lift that, right? No one at all. And so Zenoba is ready to just break the ceiling with his fist before Rudius stops him and tells him to find another way to get him out of there, to which Zenoba lands on the idea of taking Pax. Worried about what Zenoba will do, Rudius is like, hey, before you go and do anything, can you get someone else's input first? Like, Ginger or literally anyone, or mine, right? How am I input? I'm here, right? You can talk to me about what you're just about to do, right? But Zenoba calls him a worrywart and he leaves. What has Rudius released onto the world? Truly terrifying. And so before we continue on with the story, we'll be taking a quick break to talk about what blessed and cursed children are. They are also referred to as Miko, and I'm not too sure if Miko is a general term for both of them, like for both blessed and cursed children together, or if that's a name for only blessed children, but I'll just use it as a general term for both of them. Miko are born with a rare and unique ability. There were children who could run abnormally fast, who had superhuman strength, had enhanced hearing, had a body lighter than a feather, or were inconceivably heavy. Some could freeze anything they touched, some could breathe fire, some had poison tips, could teleport short distances, shoot laser beams from their eyes, could nullify any kind of poison, or would spend an entire day awake and not be tired, or have sex with hundreds of women at the same time without going soft. I don't know why that was an example, but with powers like these, the children would be referred to as a blessed child. However, if they possessed an ability that wasn't useful or was undesired, they would be called a cursed child. Essentially, they're the same thing, but it's just one was good, one was bad. But anyway, now let's discuss the Chiron Royal Palace. Currently, there were 7 princes in the palace. The oldest being 32 years old, and the youngest, I guess, didn't matter enough to give the age. But in the Chiron country, when a prince was born, he was put in command of a number of imperial guards. The guards under his command would act as his eyes and ears, and could teach him how to influence people. If he played his cards right, he'd get more guards, but if he did something bad, they'd be taken away. When a king passed away, the prince with the most guards under their belt would take the throne. That was tradition in this country. And so the more guards you had under your command, the more power you wielded, unlike most other countries where age and bloodline mattered most. Currently, the person with the most guards was the first prince, however. He was aware of his position as the oldest, and while he was a bit arrogant, he still conducted himself in a way that was appropriate for a member of the royal family. He had a total of nearly 30 guards under his command. So, who had the least? Was it the 7th Prince Pax? It's true that he only had 3 guards, but there was one fewer than that. The 3rd Prince Zenoba. without a single guard to command. Pax recently only had one, but he had acquired another guard through awful means, and was given his third guard from Zenoba by trading him a certain figure. The last of Zenoba's guards, Ginger, wanted to resign when she was sent to Pax, but then he held her family hostage, and she was then forced to stay with him. But Zenoba was actually a Miko born with superhuman strength. Because of the conflict zone was just north of the kingdom, the king rejoiced since Zenoba could one day become something like a weapon for their country. Zenoba's mother was a concubine being a woman who lives with a man but had a lower status than his wife or wives. Kind of like Lilia in a way, but she did eventually become a wife. But despite that, this woman was overjoyed by Zenoba's birth because to her it felt like that she had fulfilled her role. However, just 3 years later, Shiron Kingdom realized just how dangerous Zenoba could be when the fourth prince was born. Although this child was the fourth sibling, it was the firstborn to the crowned queen, and so the child was treated like a precious jewel. They all threw a party in celebration, but the 3-year-old Zenoba shuffled on to where his brother was and said, "Aw, how cute! You're just like a doll," and everybody awed in the cuteness, but then Zenoba kind of just tore his brother's head off as if it were a doll, and the party erupted in a pandemonium of screams. Because of these actions, Zenoba's mother was exiled, yet because he was just a child and that he was a Miko, he remained in the country. Despite how horrible the event was, Zenoba wasn't punished. That was how important Miko were. However, his guard did get lowered from 8 to just 3, and he was ordered to never be allowed more than that. The next incident occurred when he was 15. Although he was still a doll fanatic, he understood the difference between dolls and humans at that point, and so he was given a wife. This wife was the daughter of a powerful family that had withstood countless attacks from the country of Vista in the conflict zone. It seemed as though the king wanted to put Zenoba out on the front lines in the event of a war with Vista. Their wedding ceremony went quite smoothly, but then just the day after their first night together, the bride was found in his bed with her head missing. Zenoba had, yet again, ripped someone's head off. The bride's family, furious at the murder of their daughter, rose in rebellion only to be suppressed. The king took 2 of the 3 guards that Zenoba controlled, leaving him with only 1, that one being Ginger. And then the king tried to take Zenoba's favorite doll from him, but each of the soldiers who tried to had their heads completely ripped off. That is how Zenoba was known as the head-ripping prince. There is, however, a limit to how much they will let slide, despite, Zenoba being a Miko. He was a madman who killed the kingdom's legitimate heir and his own wife. The king even began to consider execution. So long he was periodically gifted a doll, he wouldn't cause any harm. And so from there on, the king had only viewed Zenoba as a dangerous weapon that only appeared to look like a human. After that, Zenoba was treated with exceptional caution. And now we're back in the present. Rudius only knew about all of this after the current situation had been resolved. He didn't know that Zenoba was like the strongest military power that the Shiron Kingdom possessed. And now several hours have passed since Zenoba told Rudius to leave everything in his hands as he ran off. But then he finally came back with a huge grin on his face covered head to toe in blood, all while holding Pax by the head. Along with Zenoba, 4 knights, including Ginger, as well as what seems to be the first and second prince, were all in the room. Including Rudius, that made 9 people crammed into this tiny little cell. The 2 princes both yelled at Zenoba, begging him to let Pax go, but Zenoba explains to them that Pax took the soldiers' families hostage, and not only the ones under his command, but the ones under the command of their father as well, and of course Ginger's family too. And so he goes on to say, "Elder brothers, remember Roxy, a king-tier water magician, who taught our country's soldiers the secrets of facing a magician in battle. A person whom we owe a great debt to. Didn't our father try to officially invite her to stay at the royal palace? And was it not Pax's foolish actions that sabotaged and destroyed our relationship and caused her to flee? And now let me tell you who it is that is trapped within that barrier. It is none other than Master Roxy's pupil, the one that she claimed was more talented than even she was, Lord Rudius Greyrat." The older brothers were like, "What? I thought you were always bored when we had parliament and meetings and all that, but you were actually listening? As your brother, I'm honestly quite relieved, but I thought you didn't care about what happened in our country." But then Zenoba says "Oh, hey, don't get me wrong. I love dolls, and Lord Rudius here is an exceptional doll maker. I'm not asking for anything difficult. I just want to save this figurine maker." and Pax's bad behavior is inhibiting my ability to do that. And now remember, Zenoba is like constantly smiling throughout all of this, but then his brother goes, "But without Pax, the slave market is," before getting cut off. "Elder brother, do not make me say it again. Your younger brother's head is about to be torn off." He wasn't smiling anymore. Pax starts to freak out and says, "Ginger, help me or your family gets it." But she reveals that Ruijerd had already saved their family, and Zenoba goes, "Now you see where things stand. I have the least authority among the princes, and that's why I've come to enlist your help. If you should refuse, I will act out with every ounce of my strength that I possess. From this distance, I could take one or perhaps both of your heads and rip them off, though I'm sure the court magicians would burn me alive afterwards." The brothers finally give in and go, fine, we'll do what you ask. And Zenoba adds that Lilia has also been taken and he'd like her to be freed as well, and they accept to free Lilia as well. And now, hooray! Zenoba, the hero. And so while all of this is happening, Rudius is kind of just standing in the barrier going like, what is going on? Is everything getting resolved somehow? It wasn't until days later that he found out about everything, right? About the Mikos and Prince, like Zenoba's past and everything, and about Lilia. It all started with Lilia being transported and was suspected of being a spy from a foreign power. She had brought up Paul and Roxy's names, and that managed her to stay out of prison, but it didn't get rid of their suspicions. And so she was confined to the palace. Once information about the teleportation incident arrived, it seemed like that she was finally freed. However, due to Pax's interference, Lilia and Aisha were forced to remain inside the castle. Once Roxy fled, Pax established contacts in the slave market, and through them he created a private army. He took some of his father's soldiers' families hostage and forced their obedience. And those soldiers searched the slums in secret, where they did eventually find their family. However, saving their family proved to be difficult. It was then that Aisha had escaped the castle, where she ran into Rudius. Thanks to Roxy, they had suspected that it was him, Roxy's pupil, that had saved Aisha. That was when they started to create their plan. First, they started a fight in the slave market to cause chaos, and with the unknowing help of Ruijerd and Eris, they succeeded. They used the fact that Aisha had been kidnapped to get Pax's private army moving. From there, they'd explain the situation to Rudius and ask him for help, and in return, they'd save Lilia. However, before they could do that, Rudius sent in his letter and got himself captured. If only he had waited a day later. He could have heard the stories of the soldiers and helped them. Perhaps Hitogami intended for Rudius to save Aisha, then send the letter, not the other way around, and that's seemingly what was intended for. But luckily for the soldiers, when they went ahead to fetch Rudius and tell him the truth, they instead found Ruijerd and they told him the story. He got fired up, saved the hostages, and he was ready to charge the castle. I guess he's really been itching to do that. Meanwhile, Ginger didn't know about any of this. It would have been risky to have one of Pax's direct underlings be involved in the plan, no matter how disloyal she was. Among the freed families, they thankfully had found Ginger's family and took them into protective custody as well. Thinking this was a good time to make a move, she handed off the Ruijerd figure to Zenoba, the man with the most brute strength in this country. She figured that he'd see Rudius as a good source of information for her figures and ally with him. Plus, she wanted to help Zenoba out because she had already sworn allegiance to him. And it is kind of strange how she still cares about him even though he'd literally traded her for just a single figure. I mean, again, he's got his priorities straight, but I'm just saying, poor Ginger. There had to be a story there. But the very next day, Zenoba had killed 2 of Pax's Imperial guards before taking Pax hostage. And so the soldiers never got to carry out the last part of their plan and storm the castle. But with that, the incident finally came to a close. After everything came to light, the king handed down his orders. First, Pax was banished from the country, despite the loss of contact with the slave market. With everything that he did, like taking hostages of the guards' families, harassing the court magician, and kidnapping a kid to retrieve said court magician, he had it coming to him. To keep appearances, the official statement said that he was off to study abroad, when in reality he was sent to the King Dragon realm to be kept as a hostage. And a similar case went for Zenoba. He too was officially stated to be studying abroad. The proposal came from the first and second princes, who claimed that the situation was partially his fault. However, they were probably just scared of having a nuclear warhead nearby them, not knowing when it could explode. And so the king seemed reluctant to let Zenoba go for the simple fact that he is a nuclear warhead, right? that's kind of what he was there for. But he decided that it was for the best considering all the trouble that Zenobia had caused him over the years. And Lilia was also released, although some still claim that she was a spy for another country, and so she was not sent back to Asura, but rather back to Paul in Militian. It did make sense though, since if they sent her back to the Asura kingdom, no one could really verify her identity, unlike Paul, who had currently strong ties to the holy country of Milis. Rudius was worried about them killing Lilia on the way to keep her quiet, but Ginger, as well as some guards who worked with Ruijerd, made sure to personally escort them to Paul, so she was in good hands. As for Rudius, the king personally invited him to stay in the region, offering him a position as the court magician, but of course Rudius turned it down. The king sighed and told Rudius, like, just scram, get out of here, all without giving a single apology. Typical king, I suppose. As Rudius tried to leave the palace, however, Zenobia clung to him in tears. He begged him to stay, and when he said that he couldn't, he begged him to make Zenobia a figure. But Rudius says that just takes way too long, and so instead, Rudius says that if they ever met again, he'll teach Zenobia how to make figures. Zenobia's like, isn't that like a top secret like skill of your trade? But Zenobia goes like, nah man, what kind of pupil would you be if I didn't teach you anything? And with that, Zenobia cried as he threw Rudius in the air, causing him to crash into the ceiling and then crashes back down into the ground. And he freaks out, gets Ginger to heal him and says, alright master, stay safe. I don't know where I'm being shipped off to, but I have a feeling I'll eventually run into you. And Rudius kind of goes like, yeah, you too bud. That's great. And that was how matters in the Chiron Kingdom came to a close. Lilia and Aisha were saved and sent to Paul, Pax was banished, and Zenobia was now Rudius' pupil. And so although Rudius didn't stick exactly to the plan that Hitogami made, because he switched a couple things around, things didn't go the smoothest, but they didn't go horribly. Everything went well at the end of the day. And although Rudius felt like that he was playing right into Hitogami's hand, and felt like he was watching a terrible play unfold, everything seemed to be going well. Everything that Hitogami had helped him out with has gone great. So maybe Rudius should put more trust in him. But no, that's just how con artists play. Rudius thinks that he should still exercise caution until he can be certain that Hitogami is trustworthy. That being said, a promise is a promise. Rudius won't be hostile with Hitogami the next time the two speak. We then cut to Rudius and the gang back at an inn within a small town in the Chiron Kingdom. It was here where the road was forked. One path led to the holy country of Milis, and the other led to the Asuran kingdom. This is where Dead End would part ways with Lilia and the others, but before that, Rudius had a conversation with Lilia in an inn, as Eris boasts about Rudius to Aisha. Lilia thanks Rudius for saving her life, not just once, but twice now. But Rudius goes, hey, yeah, it's no biggie, I didn't really do anything this time. And then Lilia says, oh, but I heard you got some information, and you came all the way out to Chiron just to save us. Rudius goes, yeah, sure, but Eris and Ruijerd were the one that actually, did things there, right? It was all thanks to them. But according to Lilia, she was told by Ruijerd and Eris that it was all part of Rudius' strategy, but he cuts her off and says that this wasn't his strategy. Lilia then is kind of a little disappointed, but she asks about how Aisha has been. But he says that she's exceptional. No normal kid would be that smart at the age of 6. And Lilia says, oh, but she's not as great as you. I tried to teach her as much as I could in these past few years, but even now my daughter's just too stupid to understand how amazing you are, Lord Rudius. And Rudius is like, hey, bro, chill. Goddamn, she's your kid. Don't call her stupid. But she then asks what Rudius thinks of Aisha, and he said, I already told you, she's exceptional. But she's like, no, I don't mean like that. I mean like her appearance. He's like, I don't know, she's cute, I guess. And she's like, well, she's my daughter after all, so don't you think that her bosom will develop as she grows? And Rudius is like, what? What are you talking about? And she then continues on and asks for Aisha to accompany him on his travels because she had told Aisha every single day that she would one day serve Rudius, her older brother. Lilia continues further and says that I've taught her everything that I know. She's still young, but give her a few years and she'll have a body that all the boys will love. And Rudius is like, you know that she's my sister still, right? And she's like, oh, yeah, I know. And I know that you're a womanizer. Or he's like, okay, look, I'm not trying to go to jail. She's too young. She is at an age where she needs to be with her parents. And so disappointingly, Lilia gives in. It's crazy that I have to say these words, isn't it? I feel like I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna be on some kind of watch list after recording these. This is awful. But anyway, he then tells Lilia not to teach Aisha anything weird, like Rudius being a pervert. And Lilia's like, I've only ever told her how amazing you are. But Rudius is like, yes, it's because of that she's rebelling. And with a quiet laugh and a bright and sunny expression, she goes, yeah, Only for the moment, though. And Rudius then thanks Lilia for bringing him the pendant and the panties. And then he asks, like, does carrying these things around really make people think that I'm a pervert? And Lilia jumps out of her seat and goes like, a pervert? Is that something Aisha said to you? And he gets her to settle down, and she explains that compared to those in the royal palace, Rudius and Paul are saints. Like someone from the palace. One of them enjoyed women's vaginal... Nope, don't need the detailed picture. Thanks. But Lilia goes on to say that there are many among the royal and noble families whose preferences are far more perverted. Compared to that, having an interest in underwear of someone you look up to is normal. And Lilia gazed off into the distance as she spoke. She was probably reliving an unpleasant memory. From there, Rudius says that he'll give them money, but if they were to ever run out, just go to an adventurer's guild and find one of Paul's subordinates. And he's like, also, I'm sure that the soldiers can be trusted, but they're still strangers, so be careful. And Lilia goes like, oh no, they're not strangers. I know every single one of these soldiers, don't worry. And Rudius is like, wait, what? You do? And just kind of ignoring Rudius's confusion, she walks over to him and gives him a hug as her voluptuous breasts smother his face and his breathing went erratic. And he's like, Miss Lilia, they're in my face. And Lilia said with a slight laugh, you still haven't changed when you were little. The next day before they took off, Eris, Ruger, and Rudius were double-checking their carriage before the two parties parted ways when Aisha flew out of her carriage, scrambling across the ground towards him, yelling, Kennel Master! Kennel Master! She grabs Rudius by the hem of his shirt and dragged him along to a thicket by the side of the road. She crouched down and gestured him to follow suit, and so he did, and she leaned close as though they were about to have a secret conversation. She asks Rudius if he can bring her along for her journey. Rudius asks if Lilia put her up to this, and she goes, oh goodness no, my mother wouldn't allow that. She wants me to serve my half-brother in the future, and I don't want any part of it. And she then slams her fist on the ground and says, we've talked about it the other day. My brother is a pervert. I can't bear the thought of serving someone like that. Please save me just as you did the other day from the evil hands of a pervert. But then Rudius is like, no, you've never even met him, so like, how do you know? And she's like, but the panties. But Rudius is like, hey, well, maybe there's a reason that he carries panties. She's like, yeah, like what? And he goes, well, Roxy was your brother's former tutor, right? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, well, she had a great deal of impact on your brother, right? And Aisha goes kind of like, well, yeah, I suppose, I guess. And in his head, Rudius is like, no, there is no I suppose. It's, yes, I am your older brother. I know what I'm saying. And then he continued saying perhaps he wanted to treasure it as an item that someone incredibly important to him wore. She thinks about it for a bit, and then he gives the forehead protector to her. And although the headband was washed, it still was a little gross and icky. You know, it's a used headband. But he then asks her if it makes more sense now emotionally than it did when he explained it with words. And Aisha says, yes, I understand. Her brother wasn't a pervert. And I mean, she was kind of right the first time. I think he is a pervert, but she then praises Kennel Master and asks that if her brother is found dead, if she can serve him instead. And he's like, what? No. What are you talking about? And she's like, well, you won't let me? I'm sure you'll understand after seeing my mom, but I think I'll grow up to be pretty amazing. I mean, with the body all the boys will adore. And Rudy's like, hey, do you even know what that means? Do you know what you're saying right now? She's like, yeah, it means a body that you'll want to start making babies with when you see it, right? And he just thinks like, who is the real pervert here? But she asks if there's anything that she can do to change his mind. And then she gives her these sad puppy eyes and says, do you hate me that much? He's like, oh my god, fine. If your brother is found dead, sure, join me. God damn it, kid. She's like, oh, you mean it? And he's like, oh yeah, of course. And like, of course, I mean, you know, she's dead, whatever, you're fine. She's like, oh, then you're not mad at me for calling you a pervert? He says, no, of course not. Wait, what did you just say? And she goes, oh, thanks, big bro. And as she said that, she gets up and ran off to the carriage as it began to roll away. And waving, she continued, see you, big bro. Let's meet again. It's a promise. Rudius was like completely dumbfounded and Eris was annoyed. And she's like, what the hell? She completely saw right through you. And then Dead End took off as Rudius thought about why she did that. Maybe she was just testing the waters to see if her brother really was a pervert? Because surely, like, because he said her name when they first met, and when Eris and Ruger talked, they must have let his name slip as well. And so upon realizing that, Rudius gave a laugh. She really was a brilliant, clever girl, and he couldn't wait to see what she was like when she was older. But not for those reasons like what Aisha's talking about. Although, I mean, if you see her when she's older, she's... Goddamn. But anyway, that is it for this episode's review of the light novel and anime. I feel like I didn't say things properly this episode. I don't know. I apologize. But I feel like a lot of what I was saying was very incoherent. I don't know how to speak. So I apologize if things were a little confusing this time around. But I'm not re-recording anything. But that is it for this episode review. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, give it a like and subscribe for more Mushoku Tensei content, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.